The afternoon sun was beating down hard as David pulled his old truck into the parking lot of Sterling Heights Bank. It was one of those fancy banks in the rich part of town, all glass windows and marble floors. He looked down at his clothes and sighed. Paint stains covered his jeans. His work boots were caked with dried concrete, and his t-shirt had seen better days. He'd come straight from the job site because time was running out on a property deal he'd been working on for months. David sat in his truck for a moment, watching well-dressed people walk in and out of the bank. Men in expensive suits, women in designer clothes, everyone looking like they belonged there. He knew he looked out of place, but it didn't matter. Money was money, right? It didn't care what you wore. He grabbed his worn leather wallet from the dashboard and headed inside. The automatic doors opened with a soft whoosh, and immediately, he felt the cool air conditioning hit his face. Inside was even fancier than he expected. The floors were so shiny he could almost see his reflection. Crystal chandeliers hung from the ceiling, and everything smelled like expensive perfume and leather. A few people in the lobby turned to look at him. David noticed their eyes scan him from head to toe, lingering on his dirty work boots. He was used to it by now. After 20 years of working with his hands, he'd learned that people judged you by what you looked like before they ever got to know who you really were. There were 3 teller windows open, and David walked up to the one on the left. The woman behind the counter was young, maybe in her late 20s, with perfectly styled blonde hair and makeup that looked like it took an hour to apply. Her name tag read Christine. She was chatting with another teller, laughing about something, but when she saw David approaching, her smile faded. Christine looked him up and down, and David saw her nose wrinkle slightly, like she'd smelled something bad. She didn't say hello. She didn't smile. She just stared at him with this look that said, "What are you doing here?" "Good afternoon," David said politely. "I need to make a withdrawal, please." Christine let out a small sigh like he was interrupting her day. "Amount?" she asked, her voice flat and uninterested. "I need to withdraw $350,000, David said clearly. The change in Christine's expression was instant. Her eyebrows shot up and she let out a short laugh. Not a friendly laugh, but the kind of laugh that made it clear she thought he was joking or crazy or both. "I'm sorry, what?" she said, still smiling like this was the funniest thing she'd heard all day. $350,000. David repeated calmly. "I'm buying a property and I need a cashier's check made out by tomorrow morning." Christine exchanged a look with the teller next to her, a man in his 30s who was now watching the whole thing with interest. They both had that same smirk on their faces. "Sir?" Christine said, and David noticed how she emphasized the word sir, like it was a joke. "Are you sure you're at the right bank? This is Sterling Heights Bank. We're a premium banking institution." "I know where I am," David said, keeping his voice steady. "I've had an account here for 8 years. Christine tilted her head, clearly not believing him. "Uh-huh. And what kind of account would that be?" "Just a regular account," David said. "Can you please look it up?" "I have my account number right here." He reached for his wallet, but Christine held up a perfectly manicured hand to stop him. "Sir, before we waste time, I need to let you know that our premium checking accounts require a minimum balance of $50,000. Do you understand what that means?" David felt heat rising in his chest, but he kept his cool. "Yes, I understand. Can you please just check my account?" By now, other people in the bank were starting to notice. A couple standing at the desk nearby had stopped filling out their deposit slip and were watching. An older woman in line behind David was craning her neck to see what was going on. Christine leaned back in her chair and crossed her arms. "Look, I'm trying to help you here. There's a community credit union about 3 blocks down the street. They might be more suitable for your needs. I'm sure they'd be happy to help you there." The other teller snickered, and David felt his jaw tighten. He'd dealt with this kind of thing before, but it never got easier. People saw the work clothes and made assumptions. They never looked deeper than the surface. "I appreciate your concern," David said, his voice still calm but firmer now. "But I bank here and I need to make this withdrawal today. So if you could please just pull up my account, I'd be grateful." Christine rolled her eyes so dramatically that the older woman behind David actually gasped. "Fine," she said, dragging out the word. "But when there's nothing there, don't say I didn't warn you." She turned to her computer and moved her mouse around with exaggerated slowness, like she was doing David the biggest favor in the world. "Account number?" she asked, not even looking at him. David pulled out his wallet. It was old and worn, held together with duct tape on one corner. He could feel Christine and the other teller judging it, probably thinking it said everything they needed to know about him. He carefully pulled out a small card where he'd written his account information and read off the numbers. Christine typed slowly, deliberately, like she was trying to make this take as long as possible. She kept glancing at her coworker, and David could see them trying not to laugh. "This is ridiculous," Christine muttered under her breath, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "I don't know why people come in here wasting our time when they clearly don't have—" She stopped mid-sentence. Her fingers froze on the keyboard. David watched as her eyes went wide, staring at the computer screen like she was seeing a ghost. The color drained from her face and her mouth fell open. The other teller noticed her reaction. "Christine? What's wrong?" But Christine couldn't speak. She just sat there staring at the screen, her hand slowly moving to cover her mouth. David stood there quietly waiting. He knew exactly what she was seeing, and he knew that everything was about to change. Christine's hand was shaking as she reached for her mouse. She clicked something on the screen, then clicked again like she was hoping the numbers would change. They didn't. Her face had gone from pale to red, and tiny beads of sweat were forming on her forehead, messing up her perfect makeup. "Is there a problem?" David asked calmly, though he already knew the answer. Christine's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. No sound came out. The other teller, whose name tag read Ryan, rolled his chair over to look at her screen. The moment he saw it, his eyes went huge. "Holy," Ryan started to say, then caught himself. He looked up at David, then back at the screen, then at David again. His whole attitude had changed in a split second. The smirk was completely gone. I need to," Christine stammered. Her perfectly manicured fingers were trembling on the keyboard. "I need to get my manager." She stood up so fast her chair rolled backward and hit the wall. David noticed that several other bank employees had stopped what they were doing. They could tell something unusual was happening, but they didn't know what yet. Christine rushed over to a glass-walled office in the corner of the bank. Through the transparent walls, David could see her talking frantically to a man in an expensive navy suit. He was probably in his 50s with silver hair slicked back and the kind of tan that came from golf courses, not construction sites. The man looked annoyed at being interrupted, waving his hand dismissively at first. But then Christine pointed at her computer screen, and David saw her mouth moving fast, explaining something. The man's expression changed. He stood up quickly, buttoned his suit jacket, and walked out of his office with Christine trailing behind him. The older woman in line behind David leaned forward. "What's going on?" she whispered. "Just a minute, ma'am," David said politely. "I'm sure they'll get this sorted out." The manager reached the teller window and looked at David with an expression that was hard to read. It wasn't friendly, but it wasn't quite as dismissive as Christine had been. It was more like he was sizing David up, trying to figure out how this man in paint-stained clothes could possibly be connected to what he was seeing on that screen. "Good afternoon," the manager said, his voice smooth and professional. "I'm Richard Davidson, the branch manager. I understand you're trying to make a rather large withdrawal?" "That's right," David said. $350,000. I explained this to your teller. Davidson's smile was tight. "Yes, well, you have to understand, sir, this is a very unusual request. We need to verify a few things before we can process a transaction of this size." "I understand," David said. "What do you need to verify?" Davidson looked down at David's clothes again, and David could see the doubt in his eyes. The manager was clearly struggling to match what he was seeing on the computer with the man standing in front of him. "Well, first of all," Davidson said, lowering his voice like he was trying to be discreet, "I need to make sure we're looking at the right account. Identity theft is a serious concern these days. Do you have identification?" David pulled out his driver's license and handed it over. Davidson studied it carefully, comparing the photo to David's face. He seemed disappointed when everything matched up perfectly. "And, sir," Davidson continued, still using that condescending tone, "I have to ask, do you understand the minimum balance requirements for our premium accounts? To maintain an account at Sterling Heights Bank, you need to keep at least $50,000 in your account at all times. If you withdraw this amount, will you be able to maintain that minimum?" The question hung in the air. Christine and Ryan were watching. The older woman behind David was watching. A couple at the next window had abandoned their transaction and were watching. Even the security guard by the door had perked up and was paying attention. David looked Davidson straight in the eye. "Mr. Davidson, I'm pretty sure my balance can handle it." Davidson's jaw tightened. He clearly didn't like David's tone, didn't like being challenged by someone who looked like a common laborer. "Sir, I'm trying to help you avoid unnecessary fees and embarrassment. Perhaps you've made a mistake about which account is yours, or perhaps you're confusing your balance with something else." "There's no mistake," David said firmly. "That's my account. Those are my funds, and I need to withdraw $350,000 today." Davidson let out a long breath through his nose, the kind of breath that said he was losing patience. "Fine. Christine, pull up the full account details. Let's see exactly what we're working with here." Christine's fingers fumbled on the keyboard. She kept making mistakes and having to retype things. Finally, she got the right screen up. Davidson leaned in close to read it. And David watched as the man's face went through several different expressions in rapid succession. First confusion, then shock, then something that looked almost like fear. "This can't be right," Davidson muttered. He grabbed the mouse from Christine and started clicking through different screens himself. "This has to be some kind of error in the system." "It's not an error," David said quietly. But Davidson wasn't listening. He was too busy scrolling through page after page of transaction history. David could see his eyes getting wider with each screen. The deposits, the investment dividends, the property sales, the business transactions. All of it was right there in black and white. "Where did—" Davidson started to say, then stopped himself. He looked up at David with a completely different expression now. The condescension was gone, replaced by confusion and something else. Maybe embarrassment, though he was trying hard not to show it. Ryan had rolled his chair over and was looking at the screen too. His mouth was hanging open. "Boss, I can see what it is, Ryan," Davidson snapped. Then he seemed to remember himself and forced his professional smile back into place. "Mr. He glanced down at the driver's license still in his hand. "Mr. Torres, I apologize for the confusion. Your account is certainly in good standing. So, can we process my withdrawal now?" David asked. Davidson's smile got tighter. David could tell the man was struggling with something. His pride, maybe. Or his assumptions about the world and how things were supposed to work. A guy in dirty work clothes wasn't supposed to have this kind of money. It didn't fit the picture in Davidson's head. Of course, Davidson said, though his voice didn't sound as confident as before. "It's just that, well, a withdrawal of this size, we need to follow certain protocols. Security measures. Surely you understand." "What kind of security measures?" David asked. He'd made large withdrawals before from other banks, and it had never been this complicated. Davidson was clearly making this up as he went along. "Well, we need to verify the source of the funds. Make sure everything is legitimate. You understand, with money laundering laws and all that?" Now David felt his patience starting to wear thin. "Are you accusing me of something, Mr. Davidson?" No, of course not," Davidson said quickly, holding up his hands. "It's just standard procedure for large transactions. Nothing personal." "It feels pretty personal," David said. "When I walked in here, your teller suggested I go to a different bank. She made it clear she didn't think I belonged here. And now you're questioning whether my money is legitimate. Would you be doing this if I walked in here wearing a suit?" The bank had gone completely quiet. Everyone was listening now, and Davidson knew it. His face was turning red and small drops of sweat were forming on his upper lip. "Sir, I think you're misunderstanding." "I don't think I am," David interrupted. "I think I understand perfectly. You looked at my clothes and made a decision about who I am, and now you're scrambling because your assumptions were wrong." Christine had tears in her eyes. Ryan was staring at his desk. The older woman behind David spoke up. "You should be ashamed of yourselves. This man came in here politely asking for help and you treated him like he was nothing." Davidson's professional mask was cracking. "Ma'am, please, this doesn't concern you." "It concerns all of us," the woman said sharply. "I've been banking here for 30 years and I've never seen such rudeness." Davidson turned back to David, and now there was definitely fear in his eyes. Fear of a complaint, fear of losing his job, fear of what might happen if this situation escalated any further. "Mr. Torres, please, let's start over. Come to my office and we'll get this all sorted out properly." David stood there for a moment, looking at this man who judged him so quickly and so wrong. Then he spoke loud enough for everyone to hear. "Just process my withdrawal, Mr. Davidson, and then I think we need to have a conversation about how you train your staff." Davidson's face looked like he'd swallowed something bitter. He gestured toward his office, trying to regain some control of the situation. "Please, Mr. Torres, let's discuss this privately." "Christine, please hold all my calls." David shook his head. "I don't need to go to your office. I need you to process my withdrawal right here. That's all I came for." "But sir—" "Right here," David repeated firmly. "I've been standing at this counter for 15 minutes. If my clothes were different, would you be making me wait this long?" Davidson opened his mouth to argue, then seemed to think better of it. He looked around at all the faces watching him. The other customers, the security guard, his own staff. Everyone was waiting to see what he would do. "Of course not," Davidson said, his voice strained. "You're absolutely right. Christine, please process Mr. Torres's withdrawal immediately." Christine looked like she wanted to disappear into the floor. Her hands were still shaking as she turned back to her computer. I'll need to get approval for a withdrawal this large," she said quietly. "It's bank policy. I'll authorize it," Davidson said quickly. He typed something on Christine's keyboard. Probably his manager code. "There. It's approved. Now please prepare the cashier's check." As Christine started working on the transaction, David noticed something. The way Davidson was standing had completely changed. Before, he'd been looking down at David, literally and figuratively. Now he kept shifting his weight, glancing at the computer screen, then back at David, like he was trying to figure out a puzzle. Ryan, the other teller, had gone back to his window, but David could see him whispering to another employee. Word was spreading through the bank like wildfire. Something big was happening. That guy in the dirty work clothes wasn't who they thought he was. "Mr. Torres," Davidson said, and this time his voice had a different quality to it. Careful. Calculating. "I notice you've been a customer with us for quite some time. 8 years according to your account history." "That's right," David said, "and you've maintained a very healthy balance throughout that time." Davidson was choosing his words carefully now. "Very impressive portfolio of investments and properties from what I can see." David didn't respond. He just waited. Davidson cleared his throat. "I want to apologize if there was any misunderstanding when you first came in. Sometimes during busy periods our staff can be a bit overwhelmed, and perhaps they didn't provide the level of service that a valued customer like yourself deserves." "A misunderstanding," David repeated, his tone flat. "Is that what you're calling it?" "We pride ourselves on treating all our customers with respect," Davidson continued like he was reading from a script. "If you felt that didn't happen today, I sincerely apologize on behalf of Sterling Heights Bank." Christine was clicking away at her keyboard, but David could see her shoulders were tense. She knew she'd messed up badly, and now her boss was trying to smooth things over. The older woman who'd been standing behind David finally gave up waiting in line and walked over to the next window. As she passed, she stopped and looked at Davidson. "You should be apologizing to him directly, not hiding behind corporate speak. That young lady was downright rude, and you weren't much better." Davidson's smile was so forced it looked painful. "Ma'am, I appreciate your input, but—" "Don't ma'am me," she said. "I know what I saw. You both looked at this man and decided he wasn't worth your time because of how he was dressed. Well, shame on you both." She walked away, and David could hear her muttering to the teller at the next window about finding a new bank. Davidson looked like he wanted to chase after her, but he couldn't, not with David still standing there. "The check is almost ready," Christine said quietly. Her earlier attitude had completely disappeared. Now she just looked small and scared. David watched as she processed the transaction. On the screen he could see his account balance. Even after withdrawing $350,000, there would still be more than enough left. Way more than enough. Davidson saw it too. David watched realization dawn on the man's face. This wasn't just a one-time lucky break or an inheritance or a lottery win. The account history showed years of careful investment, property sales, business income. This was real wealth built over time. "Mr. Torres," Davidson said, and now there was actual respect in his voice mixed with something else. Desperation, maybe. "I see you have several accounts with us. Investment accounts, savings, checking. You're a platinum-level client. We have special services for customers like you. Private banking, personal advisors, preferential rates." "I know what you have," David interrupted. "I've had platinum status for 6 years. Not that anyone here seemed to know or care about that when I walked in." Davidson's face flushed red. "Yes, well, if you'd mentioned your status—" "I shouldn't have to mention it," David said, his voice harder now. And that's exactly the problem, isn't it? You have these special services for people you think deserve them. Based on what? Whether they wear the right clothes? Drive the right car? Look the right way? Christine printed out the cashier's check and slid it across the counter toward David. Her hands were shaking so badly the paper was rattling. Here's your check, sir. Made out for $350,000. David picked up the check and examined it carefully. Everything was correct. He folded it and put it in his wallet, the worn one with the duct tape that Christine had looked at with such disgust earlier. Mr. Torres, Davidson said, and now there was definite fear in his voice. I hope this unfortunate incident won't affect your relationship with Sterling Heights Bank. As I said, we value your business enormously and we'd hate to lose you as a customer. David looked at him for a long moment. You know what the funny thing is, Mr. Davidson? I almost brought my business partner with me today. He has an account at another bank and he's been trying to convince me to switch for years. Said they treat people better there. I always defended this place. Told him you guys were fine. Davidson looked like he was going to be sick. But now I'm thinking maybe I should have listened to him. David continued. See, I don't just have personal accounts here. My construction company has 4 business accounts with Sterling Heights. My investment LLC has 2 more. I've got property management accounts, retirement accounts, my kids' college funds, all here. With each account David listed, Davidson's face got paler. Christine had stopped even pretending to work and was just standing there, staring at her computer screen in horror. That's a lot of money spread across a lot of accounts, David said. And it's all been sitting here for years, making your bank a lot of fees and interest. But I'm starting to wonder if my money wouldn't be better somewhere else, somewhere that doesn't judge people by their work boots. Please, Davidson said, and the professional mask was completely gone now. Please don't make any hasty decisions. Let me make this right. We can move you to our premium private banking center. You'd have a dedicated advisor, someone who knows your portfolio personally. No more waiting in line, no more regular teller windows. So your solution is to hide me away where your regular staff won't have to deal with me? David asked. That doesn't fix the problem, Mr. Davidson. That just covers it up. Ryan had stopped pretending to work at his window entirely. He was listening to every word, and he looked just as worried as Christine and Davidson. They were all starting to realize just how badly they'd messed up. A man in a suit who'd been watching from across the lobby walked over. He was older than Davidson, maybe in his 60s, with a name tag that read, Robert Mitchell, Regional Manager. Is everything all right here? Mitchell asked, but his tone suggested he already knew it wasn't. Davidson turned to him and David could see the panic in his eyes. Mr. Mitchell, I was just helping Mr. Torres with a transaction. Everything is fine. It didn't sound fine, Mitchell said. He looked at David, and unlike Davidson, he didn't seem to care about the paint-stained clothes. I'm Robert Mitchell, the regional manager for this area. I apologize, but I couldn't help overhearing some of your conversation. Has there been a problem today? David looked at this new man, trying to gauge whether he was genuine or just another smooth-talking banker trying to save an account. Mitchell seemed to be waiting for a real answer, not just the polite brush-off that people usually gave. Your staff judged me the moment I walked through that door, David said simply. They treated me like I was wasting their time, and when I asked for help, they suggested I go somewhere else. Mitchell's expression darkened. He turned to Davidson. Is this true? Davidson opened his mouth, but no words came out. Christine was staring at her shoes. The silence was answer enough. Mitchell turned back to David. I am deeply sorry. That's not how we do business, and it's not how I train my staff. May I ask what we can do to make this right? David appreciated that Mitchell asked instead of just assuming or offering empty gestures. Honestly, I don't know if you can. Mitchell didn't try to interrupt or make excuses. He just nodded slowly and said, Would you be willing to give me a few minutes of your time? Not here at the counter, but somewhere we can talk properly? David considered it. Part of him just wanted to walk out and never come back. But another part, the part that had spent 20 years building his business and teaching young workers about integrity, thought maybe this was a teaching moment. All right, David said. A few minutes. Mitchell led him to a conference room at the back of the bank. It was quieter there, away from all the watching eyes. Through the glass walls, David could see Davidson and Christine at the teller window, both looking like they were waiting for their execution. Please sit, Mitchell said, gesturing to one of the leather chairs around a polished wooden table. David sat down. very aware of how his dirty work clothes looked against the expensive furniture. Mitchell sat across from him and pulled out a notepad. Before we talk about solutions, I need to understand exactly what happened. Would you mind walking me through it from the beginning? So David did. He told him about pulling up in his truck, about walking in and seeing the looks, about Christine's attitude, her suggestion that he go somewhere else, the eye rolls and the smirks, about Davidson's assumptions and condescending questions. Mitchell listened without interrupting, writing notes occasionally, his expression getting grimmer with each detail. And the worst part, David said, is that this isn't new. I've been coming to this branch for 8 years. 8 years. And you know how many times someone has offered me information about premium services or better investment options? 0, not once, because nobody ever looked past the work clothes. Mitchell set down his pen. How much money do you currently have across all your accounts with Sterling Heights Bank? If you don't mind me asking. David did some quick math in his head. After today's withdrawal, probably around 47 million, give or take. Mitchell closed his eyes and rubbed his temples. $47 million. And you've been banking here for 8 years and nobody ever once thought to treat you like the major client you are. That about sums it up, David said. May I ask what you do for a living? Mitchell asked. I don't mean that in a judgmental way. I'm genuinely curious how my staff could miss such a significant client. David leaned back in his chair. I own a construction company. Started it 22 years ago with a borrowed truck and 2 employees. Now we've got 150 people on payroll, and we handle commercial projects all over the state. But I still work on site 3 or 4 days a week. I like building things with my hands. It keeps me grounded, reminds me where I came from. Mitchell nodded slowly. And the money? The construction company does well, but most of the wealth came from being smart about real estate. Every time we finished a commercial project, I'd look at the area, study the growth patterns, and buy property nearby. Sold most of them over the years as the neighborhoods developed. Did the same thing with some tech startups 10 years ago. Invested early, got lucky a few times, got smart a few more times. But you still dress like you're going to a job site, Mitchell observed. Because I am going to job sites, David said. I was pouring concrete this morning. I'll probably be back there tomorrow, checking on the electrical work. This is who I am. I'm not going to put on a suit and pretend to be someone else just so your staff will treat me with basic respect. Mitchell was quiet for a moment. Then he said something David wasn't expecting. You're absolutely right. You shouldn't have to. David looked at him, trying to figure out if this was just more smooth talk. I mean it, Mitchell said. One of our core values, supposedly, is that we serve everyone with excellence regardless of their background. But clearly we're failing at that, badly. So what are you going to do about it? David asked. Mitchell took a deep breath. First, I'm going to address what happened today. Christine will be suspended pending a formal review. Based on what you've told me, there will likely be termination. Her behavior was completely unacceptable. And Davidson? Davidson should have handled this better from the start. He should have recognized his teller's behavior and corrected it immediately. Instead, he made it worse. He'll be written up at minimum, possibly demoted. I'll need to review the security footage and talk to witnesses before I make a final decision. David nodded. What about the older lady who spoke up? The one who was standing behind me in line? She said she'd been banking here for 30 years. Mitchell looked concerned. Did she close her account? I don't know. But she was pretty upset. Said she was going to look for a new bank. Mitchell made another note. I'll reach out to her personally. Though honestly, after what she witnessed, I wouldn't blame her for leaving. He looked up at David. Just like I won't blame you if you decide to take your business elsewhere. Is that what you think I should do? David asked. I think you should do whatever feels right for you, Mitchell said. But if you're asking whether I want you to stay, then yes, absolutely. Not just because of the money, though I'd be lying if I said $47 million wasn't significant, but because you're exactly the kind of client we should be serving well. You built something from nothing. You stayed humble despite your success. You still work with your hands. That's admirable. David appreciated the honesty, but he wasn't quite satisfied yet. Here's my problem, Mr. Mitchell. You can fire Christine and discipline Davidson, and maybe that makes you feel like justice was served. But what about next week when someone else walks in here wearing old clothes? What about the single mom who comes in with her kids asking about a small business loan? Or the immigrant family who saved up everything they have but doesn't speak perfect English? How do they get treated? Mitchell was quiet for a long moment. You're asking if this is a systemic problem, not just two bad employees. I'm saying I've been coming here for 8 years, and in all that time, nobody thought to look deeper than my appearance. That suggests a culture problem, not just a people problem. Mitchell set down his pen and looked David straight in the eye. You're not wrong, and I don't have a perfect answer for you, but I can tell you what I'm going to do. I'm going to use what happened today as a wake-up call. We're going to review our training programs, our hiring practices, our entire customer service approach. We're going to bring in diversity and inclusion consultants. We're going to make changes. That sounds good on paper, David said, but I've heard promises like that before. Then let me make you a different kind of promise, Mitchell said. If you decide to keep your accounts here, I will personally check in with you quarterly. Not to kiss up or try to sell you services you don't need, but to get honest feedback about how we're doing. You'll have my direct cell phone number. If you or anyone you know has a problem with how they're treated at any of our branches, you call me directly, and I will handle it personally. David studied the man's face, looking for signs of insincerity. But Mitchell seemed genuine. Tired, maybe. Disappointed in his staff, definitely. But genuine. Why does this matter so much to you? David asked. Mitchell smiled sadly. My father was a mechanic. Worked in a garage his whole life. Always came home with grease under his fingernails and oil stains on his clothes. When I was in college, I brought him to my bank to help him set up a retirement account. The banker looked at him like he was dirt. Talked down to him. Suggested he didn't understand financial concepts. My dad had saved $40,000 over 20 years of hard work, and this banker made him feel like it wasn't worth her time. What did you do? I took him to a different bank, and I never forgot how small that first banker made him feel. Mitchell shook his head. I got into banking because I wanted to help people build better financial futures. Somewhere along the way, the industry forgot that people come in all different packages. Today was a reminder that even in my own branches, we've lost sight of that. David felt some of his anger starting to ease. Not all of it, but some. What happened to your father? He retired 5 years ago with nearly $500,000 saved. The bank we switched to treated him with respect, gave him good advice, helped him invest wisely. He and my mom travel now, see the world, all because someone looked past the grease stains and saw a hard-working man who deserved good service. There was a knock on the conference room door. Davidson stood outside looking nervous. Mitchell waved him in. Mr. Torres, Davidson said immediately, I want to apologize. My behavior today was inexcusable. I made assumptions based on appearances, and that's not who I want to be as a banker or as a person. David looked at him. Did Mr. Mitchell tell you to say that? No, Davidson said, and he seemed sincere. He told me to wait in his office. I came here on my own because I needed you to know that I'm truly sorry. I've been thinking about how I'd feel if someone treated my father or my brother that way, and it makes me sick. Your brother? David asked. He's a landscaper. Works outside every day, comes home looking a lot like you do. He's one of the hardest working people I know. If someone treated him the way we treated you today, I'd be furious. Davidson's voice cracked slightly. I don't know what else to say except that I'm sorry and I'm going to do better. David nodded slowly. Okay, I appreciate you saying that. Davidson left and Mitchell turned back to David. So what do you think? Are we worth a second chance? David sat there for a moment thinking about everything that had happened. The disrespect, the apologies, the promises. He thought about his father, who'd worked in factories his whole life and taught David that how you treat people says more about you than it does about them. He thought about the young guys on his construction crew who looked up to him, who needed to see that you could be successful and still stay true to yourself. I'm not going to give you an answer right now, David finally said. I need time to think about it. Mitchell nodded. That's fair. Take all the time you need. My offer stands regardless of what you decide. David stood up and shook Mitchell's hand. As he walked back through the bank, he noticed everyone was trying very hard to look busy, while obviously watching him. Christine was nowhere to be seen. Ryan was helping a customer but kept glancing over. The security guard gave him a respectful nod. When David got back to his truck, he sat there for a while, not starting the engine. His phone buzzed. It was Tony, his business partner. Hey man, how'd it go at the bank? Tony asked. It was interesting, David said. And he couldn't help but laugh a little. You're not going to believe what happened. He told Tony the whole story, and when he finished, there was silence on the other end of the line. "You're kidding me," Tony finally said. "They really treated you like that?" "Yep. So what are you going to do? Please tell me you're moving everything to First National like I've been saying." David looked at the bank building. "I don't know yet. Part of me wants to pull every penny out and never look back. But," Tony knew him well enough to hear the hesitation. But the regional manager seemed genuine. "And I keep thinking, if I just leave, does anything really change? They fire one teller, discipline one manager, and then what? Next month someone else walks in wearing work clothes and gets treated the same way. That's not your problem to fix, David." "Maybe not," David agreed. "But I've been thinking about something. You know how we always talk about giving back to the community? Maybe this is a way to do it." Over the next week, David did a lot of thinking. He talked to his wife, who told him to trust his gut. He talked to some of the guys on his crew, asking them about their experiences at banks. The stories they told him were eye-opening. More than half of them had experienced some kind of judgment or poor treatment based on how they looked or what they did for work. One of his foremen, a guy named Pete who'd been with the company for 15 years, told him about trying to get a car loan and being steered toward high-interest options because the banker assumed he couldn't afford better. Another employee, Maria, talked about how a bank teller had spoken to her in slow, loud English even though Maria had a college degree and spoke perfect English, just with an accent. These stories reinforced what David already knew. This wasn't just about him. It was about how society treated working-class people, immigrants, anyone who didn't fit some narrow definition of what success was supposed to look like. David called Mitchell's direct number, the one he'd been given. "Mr. Torres," Mitchell answered on the second ring. "I'm glad to hear from you." "I've made a decision," David said. "I'm going to keep my accounts with Sterling Heights. But I have conditions. I'm listening. First, I want you to create a training program about unconscious bias. Not some generic corporate seminar that everyone forgets about in a week. Something real with real examples that makes people think about their assumptions. And I want to help design it." "Done," Mitchell said immediately. "Second, I want you to start a community outreach program. Partner with trade schools, community colleges, immigrant support organizations. Offer financial literacy workshops specifically designed for working-class families. Teach them about building credit, saving for homes, starting businesses. And I want Sterling Heights to fund scholarships for people in the trades who want to start their own companies." Mitchell was quiet for a moment, probably calculating the cost. "That's a significant commitment, I know. And I'll match whatever you put into it, dollar for dollar. Between us, we can make a real difference, and you'd do that?" "I would. But there's one more condition. I want to create a review board, made up of regular customers from different backgrounds. Working people, small business owners, recent immigrants, retirees, everyone. They review complaints about customer service and have the power to recommend changes. Real power, not just advisory." "That's unprecedented," Mitchell said. "I know. But if you're serious about changing the culture, then you need accountability from the people you serve, not just from corporate headquarters." Mitchell was quiet for so long that David thought he might have lost the connection. Then he heard a long exhale. "Okay," Mitchell said. "You've got a deal. But I have a condition of my own." "What's that?" "I want you to be the chair of that review board. You've got credibility. You understand both sides of the business world and you're not afraid to call out problems." "We need someone like that," David smiled. "All right. But don't think this means I'm going to go easy on you. I wouldn't want you to." Over the next 6 months, Sterling Heights Bank went through some big changes. Christine was let go. Though David heard she found work at a smaller bank and was apparently doing better, more humble. Davidson was demoted but kept his job, and David noticed he started treating everyone who came into the bank with genuine respect. Not just the ones who looked wealthy. The training program David helped design became mandatory for all employees across every branch. It included role-playing exercises where bankers had to experience what it felt like to be judged and dismissed. Some employees quit rather than go through it, which Mitchell said was fine. They didn't need people who weren't willing to examine their own biases. The community outreach program launched with financial literacy workshops in both English and Spanish, held at community centers and working-class neighborhoods. David often showed up to these workshops, sometimes still in his work clothes, telling his story about building wealth while staying true to his roots. People listened because he was real, because he understood their struggles. The scholarship program funded 12 students in its first year, helping them start small businesses in construction, plumbing, electrical work, and landscaping. David mentored several of them personally, sharing the lessons he'd learned over 22 years of building his company. The review board met monthly and didn't pull any punches. They reviewed complaint data, mystery shopper reports, and employee feedback. When they found problems, they recommended solutions, and Mitchell made sure those solutions were implemented. Several managers who couldn't or wouldn't adapt to the new culture were moved to positions where they didn't interact with customers. The older woman who defended David that first day became a member of the review board. Her name was Helen, and she'd been a teacher for 40 years. She had a sharp eye for discrimination and wasn't afraid to speak up. She and David became friends, often meeting for coffee before board meetings to compare notes. One day, about 8 months after the incident, David stopped by the branch to make a deposit. A new teller greeted him with a genuine smile. "Good afternoon, sir. How can I help you today?" She didn't look at his work clothes with judgment. She didn't make assumptions. She just helped him process his transaction efficiently and professionally. When he was done, she thanked him for his business and wished him a good day. It seemed like a small thing, but David knew it wasn't. It meant the changes were working. It meant someone had learned to see past appearances and treat everyone with respect. As he walked back to his truck, his phone rang. It was Mitchell. "David, I wanted to give you some news. Our customer satisfaction scores for the past quarter are the highest they've been in 5 years. And we've seen a 30% increase in new accounts from underserved communities." "That's great," David said, genuinely pleased. "But more importantly, we've had 0 discrimination complaints filed in the past 3 months. 0. Do you know what it was before you came along? I'm guessing more than 0. We were averaging 15 to 20 per month across all branches. Your review board has helped us identify and fix systemic problems we didn't even know we had." David smiled. "Good, that's what I was hoping for." "I want to thank you," Mitchell said. "You could have just taken your money and left. Instead, you stayed and helped us become better. That says a lot about your character." "You gave me a reason to stay," David replied. "You were willing to listen and change. Not every company would do that." After they hung up, David sat in his truck thinking about how much had changed in less than a year. One moment of disrespect had turned into an opportunity to make things better, not just for him, but for thousands of other people who deserve to be treated with dignity, regardless of what they wore or what they did for a living. That evening, David got home late. His wife was in the kitchen making dinner. "How was your day?" she asked. "Good," he said, kissing her cheek. "Productive. Did you stop by the bank?" "Yeah, everything's good there now. Really good, actually." She turned to look at him, studying his face. "You're satisfied with how things turned out?" David thought about it. About Christine learning a hard lesson. About Davidson becoming a better manager. About Mitchell following through on his promises. About the workshops and scholarships and the review board. About the new teller who treated him like a person, not a stereotype. "Yeah," he said. "I am. We turned something negative into something positive. That's all you can really ask for." His wife hugged him, getting paint and dust on her clean shirt, but she didn't care. "I'm proud of you. You could have been angry and vindictive. Instead, you chose to make a difference." "That's what my dad always taught me," David said. "When someone treats you badly, you have 2 choices. You can become bitter, or you can become better. I chose better." The next morning, David was back at the construction site working alongside his crew. One of the younger guys, a kid named Jason who'd just started 3 months ago, came up to him during break. "Hey boss, can I ask you something?" "Sure. I heard about what happened at your bank. About how they treated you because of your work clothes and everything." David nodded. "Yeah, that happened. But you didn't just get mad and leave. You stayed and made them change their whole system." "Why'd you do that?" David looked at Jason, at his eager young face, at the future ahead of him. Because walking away might have felt good in the moment, but it wouldn't have fixed anything. The next person who walked in looking like us would have gotten the same treatment. Maybe worse. "So you did it for other people?" "I did it because it was the right thing to do, and because I had the resources and the platform to make a difference. When you're in a position to help people, you have a responsibility to do it." Jason thought about that. "That's cool, boss. I hope I can be like that someday." "You will be," David assured him. "Just remember, it doesn't matter how much money you make or how successful you become. What matters is how you treat people, and whether you use whatever power you have to make things better." As the day went on, David thought about the journey he'd been on, from that first moment of disrespect to where he was now, with a bank that was genuinely trying to change, and a community of people who'd been helped by the programs he'd pushed for. It hadn't been easy and the work wasn't finished. There would always be more to do, more battles to fight, more people who needed someone to stand up for them. But that was okay, because David had learned a long time ago that the most important things in life are never easy. Building a business from scratch wasn't easy. Staying humble despite success wasn't easy. Fighting against prejudice and discrimination wasn't easy, but all of it was worth it. That evening, as the sun set over the construction site, David looked at what they'd built that day. A solid foundation for a new community center that would serve families in an underserved neighborhood. It was good, honest work, the kind that made a real difference in people's lives, and really that's all any of us can hope to do. Show up, do the work, treat people right, and leave things a little better than we found them. David wiped the sweat from his forehead, loaded his tools into his truck, and headed home, already thinking about tomorrow's challenges and opportunities, because that's what life was. One opportunity after another to choose kindness over cruelty, understanding over judgment, and positive change over bitter resentment. And David chose well.